Howdy, B.
What's up, Rick?
How you doing, man?
All right.
Been enjoying your chat. Sitting there taking notes at my desk, some of the cool things we're talking about. I thought I'd come sit behind you and take notes.
Yeah.
See if you need any help. What can I do for you? Anything?
Just reading questions. I'm glad someone fixed the scroll on this thing.
Yeah, there's a little scroll word with the, there's a line through the word scroll now right above the chat box.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it took me 2 weeks to find that. It's a very nice feature. I don't know if I got patched in or... yeah, I was sitting at my desk following along with the chat. I'm going to load up my laptop and get into chat as well.
So someone talking about, regarding the episodes, primarily it's I think it's a story construct that there's kind of 5 different high-level narratives that we're discussing in each episode. So, as development, we put certain features in each one of those. But since it is a story-driven RPG, the main thing that's going to define each one of those, as far as kind of what new content we add. So if we add a new continent, that's certainly going to be related to the episodes. So it's the fact that the story is going to kind of drive the progression through the episodes, but then the content we add will, we're adding that for that. So as well as other features to expand it. Yeah, basically considered an expansion, as someone just said. So okay, yeah, here's someone in there, extreme. Yeah, just asking a question about just extreme realism and stuff about breakable objects. If I, for instance, shoot a fire on a tree, will the tree get a burn mark on it at least? If I had a box of wood, will it break? It's kind of 2 different scenarios there. If you hit a box of wood and it'll break, that's kind of more like creating this specific object that has an interaction. A breakable barrel, a breakable box of wood. That's something that's pretty easy to do. We already kind of have in the game right now. When we're talking about sort of interactivity as far as, am I going to be able to shoot a tree and leave a burn mark? I think that's one of those things that, once again, I think it's that bang for buck sort of thing. While I want to hit a box and see it break, and that's cool, I don't necessarily, I think that the amount of effort it's going to take to get a scorch mark on a tree from a fire arrow, and then a mark that's different on a poison arrow or a different arrow, while I like that realism, I think that our time is best spent other places. So definitely interactivity of objects, so that this barrel will break, or you can play the piano, or you can that you can interface with these different objects in the world. But there's a line there of bang for buck that we'll have to explore. So I like all those ideas, and we can sort of keep those on our list of stuff, so that when we do get these kind of core ones that are done about the interactivity, that there are different areas to expand that you guys are looking for. So interactivity means different things to different people. So hopefully we're going to focus more on the gameplay interactivity, or the interactivity of certain objects that helps us do puzzles and quests, rather than an interactivity that just leads to here is this extra art difference that's on the screen. Someone asked, would it only be housing in the first episode, or would it expand in different episodes? Every episode, we plan on expanding housing and having new areas. So definitely housing will expand each one. Well, bang for buck. You guys like it? Yeah, someone being concerned about only having one avatar. Excited to be able to do adventuring and crafting, both aspects. Does this mean that I can be great at both? yeah, we definitely, we want great crafters to be great crafters. We want great, combat people to be great at that, and you can be great at both or just one. So we definitely see those as different progression paths that we don't, that you can pursue those separately or together. So, your combat skills will be related for your combat stuff. Your crafting stuff is related to your crafting skills. So we definitely see a mark there in the middle to split these off for kind of obvious reasons. A lot of it is just people's personal gameplay style, and then part of it is, just for progression reasons and interest in our trees and things of that nature. Someone asking, when do you guys work? The number of questions is mind-blowing and off the wall sometimes. Yeah, in this Kickstarter thing, it's all hands on deck for the Kickstarter. So a lot of it is to get the information out to you guys. I said before, I try to at least spend, I usually spend a couple hours in the morning looking at the forums, and then throughout the day we bounce in here. And I have at least a little bit of bandwidth to actually work on the game. So I've been trying to clean up some assets, clean up some of our prototype scenes, and do some of that stuff behind the scenes, as well as, Lauren and Justin are getting some programming work done. So we definitely, definitely in these last days, it's all hands on deck for this. But, we've been getting some progress done behind the scenes, at least sort of like plumbing work. So whenever all this stuff, whenever our Kickstarter ends and we can kind of, wrap things up a little bit, that someone's at least been paying attention to that on the side.
And also during the last months, I've moved back to doing some world building and some real simple design doc stuff to kick things off. And again, we've all kind of been doing different things, but this last week I've really been hitting the spreadsheets and the project tracking stuff, because we really want to be able to hit the ground running on Monday and really have some good scheduling. And it's going to be tight on a lot of this stuff. And so the sooner we get a grip on what everybody needs to be doing to certain ends, it's fun to talk to the high-level guys like Chris and Richard in Dallas, and what we call milestones, and what are the things we want to see 2 weeks from now, and a month from now, and 6 months from now, and 18 months from now, and figure out those chunks of time and make sure that everything is leading towards the right stuff. And so this is a great build-up to it. Monday's really going to be finally sitting down and figuring out the nuts and bolts of everything that we've been talking about this whole time.
Yeah, it just gets more fun from here. So it's been fun so far, and it's about to get a lot more fun. So yeah, someone's asking once again about friendly fire. So I think that's one of those things that's an easy bit to turn on and off. So I think it's something we're just going to have to prototype. If we think it adds to the realism and adds to the strategy but doesn't take away from the fun, then we'll have it in there. But if it's something that we play and then realize, oh, this is just, it is a little more realistic, but guess what, it's just not that much fun, then we'll turn it off. So that's a good thing about a feature like that, is it's something to be able to prototype easily, and it's just a bit, do I hurt them or do I not? I mean, already in the prototype work that we've done for some of the combat skills, because early on I did some of that work, at least setting up some of the data for our combat skills and for our combat prototype, and that was just something that was driven in the skill, friendly fire on or off. So that's a pretty easy concept to get in there. So we're not really sure yet. It's whichever one is most fun.
And well said, Fire Angel. That was the first thing to go through my mind. Friendly fire, there's no such thing. Once I hit you, it ain't friendly anymore.
Yeah.
All depends on how you define a friend. Yeah. Yeah, I saw it go by real quick. I don't know who that was, but talking about the single-player quest line stuff, I think that's the, you'll definitely see that in the game. That's the easiest thing for us to understand. There's such a long history, certainly in Richard's games, that comes naturally. That falls out of the storytelling really easily. The fun part, the difficult part is going to be finding ways to, at times, branch out into areas where groups of people can come together, you and your friends, and explore how that might be possible. But I don't think at all that we're going to focus on that fully and 100%. I think the guys that we have doing story for us know the, we're concentrating on the growth and the storyline of you and what makes you special, and a lot of that is going to happen through the single player quest stuff.
Yeah, someone mentioned a suggestion if could Friendly Fire be a user-controlled game option. I mean, maybe in the single-player game. I mean, this is just me sort of randomly talking here, but we might have different options in the single-player game, because that's something that if you're just affecting yourself and you want a little easier game, then maybe that's okay. But certainly, I could see something in the more online version. We want more consistent behavior throughout that. But since you're going to control who you get to play with, and at least have a control over that. That's something we can kind of explore. But it's definitely a good option like I said, since it's so easy to implement as a bit to turn it on and off. Then we can see if it's right to elevate that to the player based on certain things. Yeah, someone asking about, this is definitely a good question, is once we release the further episodes, is everyone just going to move over to those? What is the viability of the old content once everyone's moved on? And I definitely see the trade and the crafting and all that stuff and just where people live. So it's definitely a good question and something we will have thought long and hard about and will in the future. So certainly a good point to bring up, but I'm pretty confident that in the way that we're going to roll out housing and sort of the scarcity of it and how many we decide to add in other episodes and things of that nature, that we'll be able to control that. But it's definitely, you don't want to have a situation where as soon as the new shiny expansion comes out that the old one is totally empty. So yeah, it's definitely a good point. We'll make sure and address it.
I saw two go by that are kind of hand in hand. Very quickly they went by. The first one was if I'm in a party of 4 to 5 people, am I really in a party? What does that mean? And then the next question was, being Rick, what's been the most challenging part of the game so far? And those two things certainly go hand in hand, because that party question is one that we've had a lot of different ideas internally. It's a lot of fun to go back and forth on that stuff, and what will that mean exactly? And there's certainly some of the discussion has fallen into the camp of when Richard was on here earlier today, he was talking about wanting to blur, how we will blur the lines between what it means to be on a quest. In a lot of games, quest means I've got a quest sticky or something in the quest log and I see stuff above the guy's head, and we don't want to do that. That doesn't mean we won't have quests, they just happen differently. And one of the discussions has also been on parties. We know how to do parties in the classical sense, where you select a player and say, hey, you and me are linked together and we share commonalities and XP and those kind of things and loot. But there's certainly an interest here in looking at how to blur those lines and still accommodate that without all of that heaviness of interaction through UI. I think the things that we've learned that we like about parties, those are the things that we put on our board, and we make sure these are the things we need that to happen. How do we make that happen? My brain is going back to my time in Guild Wars 2. I played a character from level 1 to 80 in Guild Wars 2, and I played that pretty much like a solo player MMO. I didn't do a lot of grouping. I had a few friends that I did a hard group with, but that game, more than any other, somebody explained it once that in some of the older games you had a tendency, maybe World of Warcraft was a good example when I was playing that, when I would come into a zone with somebody else, I'd wait to see, is he going in that direction? Okay, well, I'm going to go in that direction because I don't want to have to fight for mobs or crafting nodes with that guy, and so I had a tendency to stay away from other people when I was playing in solo player mode. Guild Wars 2, they fixed a lot of that, where by the middle of my character's growth, I recognized that there weren't a lot of drawbacks to being around other people. If he crafted a note, I was still able to craft that note. If he was fighting a mob, I could join in and fight that mob with him, and we were both equally rewarded for it. And that really fell out to a very casual feeling of partying. Even though I was playing very much solo, I felt like I was a part of parties that were, you know, there was an ebb and flow to it. I found somebody and we played together, and then we broke up, and it felt like we were in a party together without ever truly choosing that we were. So I think those are some interesting ideas, and I think we'll explore both sides, and in the end we'll pick the one that works best for the social nature of stuff. I think we'll have our biggest slant will be on players being able to cooperate and be social together. So in the end, whatever works best for that, I think. AB, I saw a question go by earlier today that for anybody that participates in the Kickstarter and has a rent-free house, will they have the option of actually paying rent if they want to?
I saw that question. That's interesting.
That was an interesting one. For some reason, it stuck in my head throughout the day.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We can find a way to make that happen. I saw someone asking over here about fishing competitions and things of that nature. You know, totally love that stuff. I mean,
that's on my other piece of paper. On a short list of things to talk about today. I had fishing competitions written down. Yeah,
totally love that. I mean, there are lots of interesting ideas for fishing systems. So I plan on having the most awesome fishing system ever if it's under my control. So certainly, I love that because there is there's an aspect of it that fits in the game where, okay, here's a resource for food, and then a fun aspect too, and a collect-em aspect, and maybe even a breeding aspect. I mean, the great thing about fishing is, it'd be fun to expand it. I think that's one of the most exciting things about the crafting stuff we talk about, is that we get to keep expanding this thing more and more and more. So it's fun to think of, the crafting aspects of the crafting system starting out small, but then ending up in these after years in these just interesting, situations. So that's why it's always good to get everyone's ideas on the crafting thing. So, maybe we don't get it out in one, but I've seen some really crazy crafting or crazy ideas on the forum, kind of that help me think about things differently. So sometimes I'm in such a development mode, of okay, step 1, 2, 3, how do we get to this? That when someone shows me step 100. And it kind of gets me to walk back, and even though maybe 50% of their idea we probably can't do, but 50% of it at least makes you think differently about it, so that we'll have some really interesting stuff. So I'm excited about all that. So more ideas on fishing, better.
Will drinking get you drunk? Who's that from? Ergonite. That's a great question. That's not really a hard one to program. It's a hard one to consider. It really just kind of falls into the design of almost like a potion system, right? If I've got a potion that ups particular stats, then I can create a potion, call it a wine, and it downs my stats. Question is, how much time and effort do you want to put into it? Does it really simply fall out of the alchemy system? I know earlier today I saw Chris in the chat talking about his brewmaster capability. So I think that's something that some or most of us hold near and dear to our heart is drinking. And so a lot of consideration goes into that. I don't know that it would be too difficult to implement. We just definitely want to think that through. And if you want to get drunk and go out and fight monsters and fight your friends, well, I think that's something you should be able to do.
Yeah, and someone asked about archery competitions and then adding on baking. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting thing that a challenge that now that I wrote that down, that almost every aspect of the crafting system, while certain things aren't, so blacksmithing that's more catered around combat stuff, and maybe this is more catered around creating decorations. We should probably strive to have competition in every aspect of this, because that is kind of a role-playing thing. And a lot of that stuff I like at least give you guys the tools to kind of run it. We don't necessarily have to have this formal kind of thing. We just have to give you guys the tools to do that stuff yourself. So I like the aspect of trying to, challenging us as designers to make sure that all the crafting stuff we put in has some at least competition aspect that people can compete, on an equal, level, but then also achieve stuff. So I like that. It's a great idea. Competitions for all. Good idea.
Crafting competitions.
Yeah, that's cool. I can already think about it.
That was a cool one, and I can't believe we haven't had this on a whiteboard somewhere yet, but getting drunk is now on the list.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not a getting drunk competition, but we'll see.
Not as a competition.
Yeah, someone's mentioning fishing competitions are already done in other games. Yeah, we get that.
And I like kind of where that conversation went in the chat, as we talked about getting drunk. I really talked about it from a very simple stat perspective and how easy that is to implement without programming. Of course, Chris was talking about the heavier implementation of that, of some screen blurring and screen shaking, and then even more than that would be new animation assets, so that visually your character is stumbling around and walking around, and those are the things that we need to think about and consider. Is it a compelling system if that seems to get a little long-winded and difficult to implement when art assets come in, and so if we're looking at bang for the buck and that's not there in the getting drunk system, then we look at, is it even compelling anymore if it's purely on a stat basis? And we got hundreds of things to look at in that respect in the coming days and months.
Yeah, someone mentioned the EQ system, where when you got drunk, then whatever you typed in chat, was like that. So all that stuff is really awesome. I mean, whether it's full screen effects or messing with your ability to communicate, you just want to keep that stuff to where it's not it's not your guy staggering around or a new animation or something, but a full screen effect and then some other aspect. Just want to keep the effects of it to where it's not more development time. It's just, oh, here's a hook over here. Let's make you're drunk, sort of ping this thing. So definitely good stuff. So.
And Smack says if we're going to have booze, then we're going to need to have medical herbs. I'm not even going to go there. Does make me think of Lord of the Rings Online, though, didn't they?
Sure.
Pipe weed.
Yes, I did. Yeah, me and Rick, are played a lot of Lord of the Rings Online. Are a big fan of their crafting system and their just role-playing system, and so I think that's a really great game that I had a lot of fun with. So.
I'm not sure if you guys were talking about it in here. I think since you've been in here, I saw something go by about housing decorations, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody that really disliked the Lord of the Rings Online decorating system but loved EQ2. Whoever that was, I think Richard, Lord British, is definitely in your camp. It's probably been a year or more, but there was a time about a year ago where we were all at work that our friend James Parkman was still here, and he had a very high-level EQ2 character, and I had a pretty high-level Lotro character, and so we were able to show Richard both methods of home decoration, and Richard really liked the ability to put anything anywhere that you want, which was the EQ2 model. Really disliked kind of that hot spotting, that Lord of the Rings Online that, personally, I thought it was cool at the time. The more we nitpicked it apart, I understand certainly why somebody would like a system where you put anything anywhere. It's a little harder to implement. Since that time a year ago, played Skyrim, and Skyrim seemed to be a really good middle ground of both the Lord of the Rings system and the EQ2 system, where actually I'm not sure how buying a regular house and decorating it in Skyrim worked, but with the Hearthfire DLC, where I was able to piecemeal my house together and build it up, they had obfuscated the hot spotting, but you could select certain things that you couldn't decide, like shelves on the wall or beds. Those went into a very particular place, but they still had the mode where you could pick up individual things around the house and put them where you want. And that seemed like a really nice middle ground. It allowed them to carefully plan and design a house that looked nice from scratch for players that just wanted that simply without knowing any more. And then that was extended by being able to pick up things and put them wherever you wanted around the place. So that's something that as we get to that, I'd really like for all of us to look at all three of those models, to the far left, the far right, and the middle, and we're going to have to decide what's right for us with all things considered.
Yeah, someone asked a question here about towns and cities. Can we have a job board where it gives you a name of a person? We go to them and see what they need done. As we think about this, we think about sort of quest and content and stuff to do. And that's one thing we want to do is, if it is a quest, we want it to be this epic thing that you're doing. I think one, problem that we have is it's not a epic quest, to go kill 10 rats or something like that. Now, that's maybe a task or something that someone might need done, like maybe a farmer. We want to have some fiction behind that. So maybe a farmer, needs this done, but we want to put those in the proper context. So we kind of want to make sure quests kind of stick with our storyline, and we're not trying to say, here's this epic, awesome thing, do this tiny little, tiny little task. But something like this could definitely work. We had tons of discussions like this, just as a task board or something that is a way that, people can communicate back and forth jobs or things that need to be done. So I think the main thing is, when we say quest content, there's a couple different, almost in how complex it is, how much that task needs to be rolled into kind of the storyline. So we definitely see, outside of the standard quest line, the story quest line that Tracy and Richard are going to work on, we're still going to have tasks and things for people to do. We just want to make sure they have the correct context so that it fits into the world, so that it isn't just some guard that tells you to go kill 10 boars over and over, that there is some reason, and that there's some so maybe we have something that is a similar, at least the goals. So maybe someone needs these 5 boars killed because they've done this certain thing, but just want to make sure there's a more fiction behind it, or that it's properly fit in there to where everything just isn't a parallel, to where there's 1,000 quests and they're all equal importance and presented as equal awesomeness. If it is a certain task that needs to be done, that I need 10 leather straps, okay, that's something, but it's not this epic thing. So we see content layered a little differently like that. So
I saw another good comment come from Tommy Gunn. It's something that actually I had started up a document today just because we had a lack of document for achievements, and really what had me thinking about achievements was, as I went through and looked at all of our tiers and kind of sanity checked everything that everybody's getting on all the different Kickstarter tiers, saw the titles. Titles to me very much are kind of layer on top of achievements, and to me, if we have a design doc for achievements that simply says we won't have achievements, I wanted that to be called out one way or the other. So that's something that we've talked about here. I have very strong feelings on achievements. I love achievements. Since I'm such a single player guy, it's this reimagined checklist in my mind of a very simple list of achievements will extend my gameplay into a game maybe 5, 10, 20 hours. Just kind of done, but hey, I haven't checked off all this stuff. I do agree, Tommy, that they need to be to be good achievements. They can't simply be fall down 10 times, get drunk 30 times. I know Richard is going to feel the same way you do, and so that's our challenge. Is if we do want achievements, how to make those really good. I have to say, thinking back to Lord of the Rings Online, some of the titles that came from achievement style things, that kill 30 trolls and you get the troll killer title, and kill 100 trolls and get an even more special title that's very much related to that achievement, even though they didn't call it achievements. To me, that was a great achievement system, and one of my favorite titles from that was Breakfast Connoisseur, where you had one of every type of breakfast food across. And so it's always an interesting system to talk about, because what seems important and compelling to one person doesn't to another. I know there's people here that'll look at that Breakfast Connoisseur achievement / title and be like, well, that's the silliest thing I ever heard of. That gave me a good 4 or 5 hours of gameplay running all around the world finding all these silly little foods just so I could have that title. So at least my personal plan is for us to have some pretty in-depth conversations about, will we have achievements, and if so, what does that mean, and how do we make them compelling for everybody?
Yeah, another question here. I guess I should try to maybe start saying people's names in the question. Anthony Corrigan, speaking back and see how you can improve an item with blacksmithing and potentially lose it, but how can you rebake a cake and not lose the immersion? So the idea there was, if you just take the examples like you're saying, so we have blacksmithing and we have cooking. The idea with cooking is I can see a situation where, you cook 20 cakes, and then there's a use for those 20 cakes. Now the problem in blacksmithing is we don't want a situation where it's like you create 20 blades, because we want to give you a different method to do that. So certain skills, you're definitely going to have to produce, large amounts of them, because it fits in the context of that. If you're a good baker, then okay, let's make a lot of cakes. But that's why and definitely the ingredients in cakes, aren't going to be as expensive, at least a simple cake, than a sword. It's like you have sugar and flour or something of that nature versus the metal. But what we wanted to do was to give people, give a blacksmith something they could do to kind of get their skill up that isn't just, let's have a production line for swords. So I made 70 swords and I go sell them to the vendors. So we want to have a situation where, you know, that repairing and then improving, and that there's something you can do that isn't this big momentous crafting thing for those skills that take the more expensive resources. So we're not necessarily saying that every one of kind of the production aspects of the crafting systems are going to be the same. Oh, here is, you know, improving a house decoration or something. You know, it's like, it's the context of those. But since blacksmithing is something that the materials that you're putting into it are pretty valuable, we wanted to find a way that it's not just a production line of creating 50 swords. Now maybe we have in the game some story element where, you know, the town guard needs these swords. We don't want, so that then you have a goal for that, but we don't want the standard way a blacksmith progresses is, you know, make 200 swords and then go sell them to the vendor. So that's the goal there, is for those ones that have more expensive resources and that fit on, you know, that fits more thematically with that. So certain things you will have to create a lot of, but it's more stuff that fits in the context of the skill.
I like where Chris is going with the achievements discussion. Yeah, I like it added to achievements at its best. Unlock new things. It's not a flat list of silly titles to get to. It's a layer to introduce new levels of gameplay. At its best for me.
Yeah, we're not saying that we're, you know, people expressing some regrets about the Lord of the Rings system. You know, it's not necessarily that's saying what we're going to do. It's just, you know, you look at all kinds of examples of stuff, and certainly that's a system that's, you know, 5 or 6 years old. So we're going to do something different than that. But, you know, each one of these games, you just try to evaluate the pros and cons of stuff so that, you know, whenever we're creating a system, we're not just talking about the pros, that we're making sure that from a design perspective and an implication perspective, we're analyzing the cons as well. So everything has strengths and weaknesses. You know, there's lots of examples of housing systems, so we're just trying to make sure and summarize all those and pluck the pros that we like and try to minimize the cons. So.
And the beautiful thing about this process, you know, it always kind of goes on within our own development group and family here, that somebody throws something out that they really like, there's probably somebody else to talk about why they dislike it. And as we open up the discourse this wide with our fans and backers and stuff, yes, I don't think anything will escape a full discussion about the pros and the cons and the good things to take and the bad things to leave behind that are best for the game and this great big group of everybody that we have now. 18,311 backers. How cool.
Nice.
3 days to go, folks. Here we go.
Yeah, another comment about achievements, but I echo everyone's, you know, idea that they will be in the game, and the main thing is just, once again, the proper context. A lot of these, you know, mechanics that you see in other games, we're going to use those mechanics, but make sure, you know, that they're implemented and you know, that they're ingrained in the game in a way that makes sense and isn't just, you know, a checklist of stuff. That it does make sense, like Rick mentioned with the titles or something of that nature. But certainly big achievement fans.
Jonathan, I have lots of thoughts on letting us gather materials to build houses. That's going to be a fun system to really nail down. Again, kind of like we were talking about all these different all the different systems from the different games we've looked at, and trying to figure out, you know, the far end of the spectrum is a very simple system where it is, hey, I want to build my house, boom. And the other end of the spectrum is a system of gathering and crafting where it takes a month to get that house. And I see both sides of that coin. You know, if I want a house, I want it now. I don't want to have to wait for it forever. But the opposite side of that is you make me wait forever for it. Boy, is it cool at the end of that month. And so we're going to do a lot of discussion about that and figure out where in the middle of all that. Personally, for me, I fall a little bit more towards the side of I think it'd be fun to have to craft the house, but boy, it's gonna bleed out to a lot of other systems. So there's a lot to examine there, and what any of those decisions mean.
Yeah, domination. You mentioned you have lots of ideas. Well, get on the forums and let's hear about them.
Absolutely. We spend a lot of time on the forum, so if you feel you've got some feedback, and you know, I see the chat going by very fast today. I apologize to everybody whose great questions we're missing. Hit the forum, start up threads, find out threads that we're hanging out in that already match some of these topics, and let's talk.
I think that's one thing too. You know, as we move forward to the end of the Kickstarter, you know, once we can focus more on our internal site, then I expect us to be more active in the forums. You know, I'm active reading them, active, you know, taking lots of notes, discussing them with people. We're not diving in there too much just yet, but I think post the Kickstarter thing here, starting next week, you know, as we can kind of set our development plan, that we'll definitely have more visibility in there. But the good thing about those forums is, you know, it is a repository of information. So if it's there, you know, we'll see it. And if I'm the one, you know, if me and Rick are the main people that have seen it, then, you know, it'll get to other people later on. You know, particularly Dallas, Chris, and Richard and Fire Lotus are totally swamped with you know, handling this Kickstarter thing. So I'm excited about getting to the end of this and you know, getting a little less chaos so we can, you know, get more to you guys. So it's been a fun experience. It's going to be fun to see how this thing's end, but it's also going to be fun to be able to double down on the forums and make sure to be more active in those as kind of our, you know, our signal to noise ratio gets a little less.
Loving reading all the housing ideas, guys. It's good stuff. And can I just tell everybody how proud I am of myself for all of the many things I've typed to troll my friend Chris here in the chat. Everything I've typed, I've deleted before I actually sent it.
Yeah, someone mentioning and talking about food. Will they be a buff or required to survive? And we're looking at it now as more of a buff. Yeah, I think old school gaming is, well, we want to emulate some of that. I definitely prefer, you know, you get a benefit, and if you don't have it, well, then that's you're missing out on it. Then, you know, you need this thing to get you back to a certain level. So I think sort of requiring food is one of those things that, I guess, whether it's a positive or a negative, you know, how you handle it is one of those things based on, you know, realism versus fun. Well, I think we can still, you know, it's easy to implement something like that either way. You want to make sure that, you know, you're looking at fun as a #1 thing, and so whenever those things butt heads, I usually prefer to look at it that direction. You know, let's give you a buff for doing this than making it a requirement.
Mon X Terry wanted to know about arm wrestling. I'm not sure if you meant arm wrestling in the game or arm wrestling here on the live cam, but I like the idea of the arm wrestling on the live cam. We may get to that tomorrow. Spirit and honor, I do believe that there will be stuff like messages in a bottle from fishing. I don't know that will exactly, that you'll pull up a message in a bottle, but as far as the fishing skills concerned, we've certainly had a lot of talk about things that you might fish up that would not be fish.
Sure. Sorry, Cool Phoenix, no houseboat pictures yet. Yeah, someone, Jonathan Doran again. Any thoughts on letting gather materials to build houses? You know, we talked a lot about that sort of stuff. You know, whenever you buy your house plot, there's definitely our property deed. You're going to be able to put different houses on that. So there's going to be different methods for doing that. So it's something we haven't, you know, we need to discuss more. But I see there's definitely different avenues for you know, ways to get these houses. are there any big fans of PvP on the team? Of course. I mean, played various PvP in different games, and Guild Wars or WoW or Shadowbane or different things like that. So we have a lot of experience here with that. So I think it'll be properly represented.
I'm not one of those people. I think that's why.
Rick's not.
I think that's why I'm not on the design team full time. Like there's areas where I excel in, and I pretty much call those the Care Bear areas. There are the discussions I've heard go on about PvP here are so in depth and so knowledgeable about the systems and the things that need to be considered and figured out for them. Even as somebody that I don't enjoy PvP for myself, but I understand the desire for it and the fun of it for other people. I have high confidence that just the small group that we have now, that stuff is going to get figured out correctly for people who enjoy that. I'll be busy sitting in a chair fishing, though.
How often does the team talk about PvP? Every day. I mean, it's a constant discussion.
That's when I leave the room. Speaking of which, it's been a pleasure hanging out with all of you today. Thanks for coming to the chat. As always, these have been some great questions. I filled up 2 or 3 pages of notebook paper today from the small times of being in here and reading the forums and stuff. I look forward to continuing these discussions in almost perpetuity. I don't know that our audience may get smaller post-Kickstarter as we move into developer mode, where some of these chats are going to take place with a smaller group of people, just to be able to nail down and really get the nitty-gritty done and close the noise down. But I'm pretty sure one of our tier rewards is at the developer level, where we'll have some closed developer chats. That's where a lot of this stuff is going to continue to take place post-Kickstarter time. But we got 3 days to go too, and you will not see a lack of us in the forums or the chats or in front of this webcam for the next couple of days. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I know a couple people mentioned about the time frame, that it's late and for Europeans and things like that. That's something we've definitely discussed, is making sure, let's figure out what are the prime times for our big markets and make sure that, we have, that we stretch it out, or at least have discussions like this. If, need to schedule hangouts at that time too, but if we can't, we can definitely have informal stuff. So moving forward, we're definitely going to explore some off-time stuff to make sure our fans in Europe and our fans in Japan and all over the world, don't have to stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning to do something like this their time. So definitely, in discussions like that, and should be able to get something out here in the next short time, making sure that we're catering to you guys as well. So any of you guys that stayed up late or are up early, we really appreciate it. So.
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm going to be leaving work here shortly. I'll be missing the Google Hangout tonight. I've made the first 2. It's a lot of fun. It's breaking my heart to not be here for it, but I'll be thinking about everybody and maybe even listening to it from my phone on the car ride home.
Hey, it's cool. Someone ran out of questions. Nice. I think that's a first.
What is this thing?
That's a Razer mouse. It's really awesome.
Dude, that thing just pulses and glows. I've never seen a Razer. Man, look at all the buttons on that thing. Oh, dude, I need to get my hands on one of these. Whose mouse is it again?
Well, I think it's mine, but I think Razer made it.
Razer made it. Cool beans. All right, I'm going to
nice
look
stuff.
on Amazon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. I'll set up the Dippy Bird.